Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. My name's Jeremy, and this is Divergence Media. So tonight we're going to bring something a little different to you. We're going to talk about the Club of Rome. If you're not familiar with the Club of Rome, we're going to give that detail, those details to you, of course, here in just a few moments. But I want to kind of lay out sort of some foundational issues here before we get into this. I've been pondering on this since I've been doing some research on it, and in my opinion, this looks a lot like a new religion. So I want to give you, in my mind, I've sort of constructed the three things necessary for a religion, okay? The first thing that's necessary is that the person that you want to accept this religion must be absolutely beat down, okay? So everything about them, they must be humbled in the presence of the Lord, right? And so they must feel completely hopeless, that no matter what, them alone, they cannot fix this problem, and they alone are responsible for the destruction of humanity. Okay, so they must be left completely without hope, a complete sense of hopelessness, despair. Okay, and that's kind of where we get into the second stage, which is the response. Really ties into the Hegelian dialect. The response to that is just a sense of hopelessness, depression, despair, just fear. What can we ever do to solve this? And then, of course, the solution comes. Well, the solution is you must surrender. Every bit of your being, your identity, everything about you must be surrendered to this all-sovereign Lord, this all-knowing power, and then and only then can you be saved. So tonight, I'd like to introduce you to your new religion, and that is called climate change. Yes, that is right, climate change. That is your new religion. You must surrender every bit of your identity and being to the systems of power. That way, that's the only way that humanity is going to be saved, and the Club of Rome is leading the way on that new religion. So I'm going to pass this over to Cliff, and he's really going to kind of take the lead tonight because he knows a lot more about this than I do. I've definitely done some research and have been shocked, as I think many of you will be, as you hear some of these facts and just some of the very words that they've actually spoke. I think just the very things that they have said will probably shock you. So, Mr. Cliff Rockefeller, how you doing tonight, sir?
Feeling pretty good tonight.
Yeah.
It's afternoon again here in the great NZ, some would call it, New Zealand Incorporated. Yeah, things are good. So probably to start with, I'll probably go back to when I first heard of the Club of Rome, and that was, I found it back in about 2003, 2004, when I started to get into the global government situation, trying to get behind the curtain of what we said before, the shop front. And David Icke, a lot of you guys have heard of him. He was one of the guys that started talking about the Club of Rome in his books about, the global elite. So he didn't go into that much detail. All I knew is that it was a think tank. A lot of you guys have heard of things like the CFR. That was another thing that came out years ago, Council on Foreign Relations.
And these guys actually work a lot with the CFR too. I mean, they're very tied together.
Yeah, they're all linked together. They're intelligence agencies, really. So, mentioning the Club of Rome again, it is a lot like MI5, MI6 specialist group of experts. So even just looking into Wikipedia on it, which is, again, very basic coverage. But so they're saying it's founded in 1968.
Let me switch over to that real quick for our viewers here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm gonna get you guys switched over in 1 second. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's founded in 1968. Now, when they say that, usually these very highly organized non-governmental, you look down there, it's a non-profit NGO group. An NGO group is non-governmental organization. They tend to get away from the jurisdictional aspects that most corporations or incorporations do. They tend to, through law, international law and legalities, they can set themselves up as a foreign trust. This is really where the elite get their powers. It's all words and legalese and jurisdictional contracts or treaties. So they're a non-profit. See, I mean, you think about it, to get a huge think tank of this order with very expensive people that are well paid, that are in it, involved in it, takes a lot of money. So this will ultimately be paid by taxpayers. It'll be paid by all the global, because it is a global organization. So it'll be
Mm-hmm.
funded by all kinds of different tariffs, and some of the private corporations will be putting and setting off debt into these types of things, uh, to get away from jurisdiction from, the general shopfront governments that people are under. So these guys operate in a totally different world from what the average Joe does. And they do, most of them come from special schools, the top tier schools, red
Ivy
brick
League, yep.
schools, Ivy
Mm-hmm.
League, yeah. And they're the experts in all fields, so they can draw from a lot of information from people that are actually, uh, movers and shakers in the world.
Sure, quote
So,
unquote experts.
yeah, quote unquote experts.
Yeah,
Technocracy again, right? So,
yeah.
but these things go back, these groups and the people and families, etc., again, that are connected, go back in time. It goes beyond 1968. But anyway, it was founded at Academia, basically, di Linci, which is Italian, right? Goes back to Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, we're getting close to the Pope and all that stuff too. Remember, Club of Rome. This is all connected to their agendas too. You're talking about a global government, global governance, they call it. So they would have instant control on the EU, which is huge. They'd be working with Russia. They'd be working with the whole friggin' world, and
Right.
they're working with what they call science, which is, some would say, those have looked at definitely at David Icke, the new religion. Science is
Yep.
the new religion. But why? Because it's so complex now, and we know there's a lot of stuff they're hiding from us. So they're going to give us little tidbits, as you can see, of their scientific findings, just with everything: environment, the world, food, technologies, and that. It comes out in the media. Now, when all of this stuff that's fired out into the mainstream media pool, which most people around the world get all the same media now, all of that is filtered through the Royal Institute of International Affairs. And they're like a more of a do think tank. They're an active think tank. That could be another topic. And they are the CFR. They're the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I'm trying to build the scope and power of this organization. Most people hear it and they think, oh, it's just a group, it's just a club of rich people. But
Sure.
it isn't. It goes right back through, again, if it's linked to Royal Institute of International Affairs, then you're also talking by default, it working with United Nations, which is
Mm-hmm.
obviously a big organization. And then, of course, that Royal Institute of International Affairs goes back to Chatham House, as I said last time. Chatham House is getting into the royalty now. You're getting into the kings and queens of the world, which are in all
And
countries.
now, in fact, don't isn't it the Royal Institute of International Affairs? Isn't that known on their wiki page? Don't they actually say that is also the Chatham House, or there's the Chatham House
Yeah,
has another word? But I thought on the wiki page they actually said it was one and the
yeah,
same.
it pretty much is. Yeah, I mean, but
Okay.
that's to call it Royal Institute of International Affairs gives an entry point to the conglomerate that fits into each country.
Mm-hmm.
Like New Zealand Institute of International Affairs, Australian Institute of International Affairs,
I
etc.
see. Yep.
They can't say Royal in America, so they call it CFR, Council of Foreign Relations, so it looks
Council
very
of Foreign
neutral.
Relations. Sure.
So, yeah, it's bizarre. But anyway, so Club of Rome, blah, 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 it's founded, supposedly in Italy. It probably goes back hundreds of years if you can trace it. And
So
so their
right there,
first. Mhm.
just for future reference too, I hate to keep cutting you off. I don't mean to interrupt, but I will say, looking at this building, this it's an Italian science academy.
Mhm.
I may be wrong here, but I bet it'd be very fascinating to look at some of the symbolism around that old Italian building. Uh, that's something maybe to
Sure.
look at down the road, just to look at some of the ancient artwork and symbolism on that building. But anyways, continue.
Sure. So yeah, you can all, like you mentioned, the science. They're organized around science and natural sciences and all that stuff. So you can already see them with a foundation there, with an eye to, the environmental sciences, you could say. So this particular group is set up with that idea. A lot of people don't know that. They think the Club of Rome, maybe it's sort of some vague thing. No,
Hmm.
its purpose is for this agenda. So it was set up in 1968. The agenda for this first global revolution, which is the book that the Club of Rome wrote, that we'll get into. They wrote that as their second report, they call it.
Hmm.
Goes back way beyond 1968. This plan of what they're doing. So their first report is the limits to growth. We touched on that last time.
Yep.
So, what is that? Well, we won't go too much into that right now, but it basically goes into what's called postmodernism. And a lot of
Hmm.
people have heard of that. And that's insane, eh? Because growing up, you think, yeah, we're living in a modern world and we're heading to space and we're going to do all these things and we've got computers and it's wonderful. But
Hmm.
little do people know that in the background, they're already starting to pull away all the chairs and the curtains are coming down and we're going to be left seeing a brick wall
Hmm.
that was hidden. So they're shutting down with this book, Limits to Growth and Postmodernism. They're shutting down growth, everything to do with growth.
Right.
Reproduction, even to some extent, scientific progress in the shop front to some degree. And that's
Hmm.
already showing. Things are kind of slowing down. All the phones and computers aren't changing a hell of a lot very quickly. Automobiles are going through a transition because that's a must be with their plan. So they're very, very controlled, incredibly controlled. And they're looking at every aspect of every country, of every culture, and everything we do. It's looking at the doll's house again. They treat us like dolls, basically.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
but limits of growth, the basic concept of that is that there was an explosion of birth rate and just an explosion of population, so much so that the population is surpassing that of the amount of resources that the earth can possibly provide in order to to maintain a sustainable environment. So what they're saying here is that we must dramatically reduce population and dramatically change our lifestyles in order to uh, get below that set point to where the earth can sustain our existence.
right. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So exactly. Yeah. Um, that's basically where they're sort of heading with it.
Right.
They're already starting because people that have looked at the climate change thing, we've heard that it's to do with computer models. Well, they're saying that Club of Rome stimulated considerable debate, considerable attention with the first report from the Club of Rome Limits of Growth published 1972. Its computer simulations
Yeah.
suggested that economic growth could not continue indefinitely because of resource depletion. 1973 oil crisis increased public concern about the problem. See, now, a lot of these things, as people know, they do false flags, but they do false flags for everything. Like if they have a plan to take down a structure of society, they'll make a crisis there. They'll make an oil crisis and then put it out there. And
Hmm.
how many times have we seen, say, with oil in itself, massive contradictions to what they're saying? Like they
Sure.
said only a few years ago, 2008, when they doubled the price of oil, they said, "Oh no, peak oil," and that just disappeared.
Right.
Within a couple of years, it was gone again, and now it's all nah. There's no such thing as that. So, as we get into this, we'll see that they're just a bunch of liars and
Yeah.
propagandists. I
Sure.
mean, that is what they're doing. They're a propaganda think tank that is solely working on a particular level of the global government
It's just the
with through United
Hegelian
Nations.
dialect is their main mechanism that they use here constantly.
Yep, order out of chaos, crisis
Hmm.
creation.
Yeah.
So then we look at some of the members, just while I'm on the Wikipedia page.
Hmm.
So you got here Princess Beatrix of the Netherlands. That's
Is
interesting.
this down? Is this? Oh yeah, here it is. Notable members.
Organization. Yep.
Yep.
And this is just in Wiki. There's a whole bunch more.
Oh yeah.
Fernando Henrique, another guy. Look, a Freemasonic sash there. Top guy there. They're all top people.
Hmm.
Mikhail Gorbachev. So he's still alive, and he's been a major player in the history of this global system. Like he is right behind this think tank. Amazing, eh? And what did he
Hmm.
quote? I think we quoted the other week. The Mikhail Gorbachev quote is, you can easily look it up, the threat of environmental crisis is the international disaster key to unlock the New World Order.
Yep.
I mean, what the hell?
Yeah.
What is this guy, you know? So, I mean, and if we say New World Order, we're crazy. They
Oh
can
yeah.
say it, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So then we have King Carlos of Spain, etc., etc. So the more you look into it, you'll see, there's a whole bunch more people that they don't even mention there.
Yeah.
And I've got
Well,
another part here.
uh, so I don't see it on here, but through the research that I've found, I've seen that Al Gore was tied to this. Bill Clinton was tied to this. I mean, a lot of U.S. Uh, politicians were all tied to this as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're all the countries, as we go into this, we can see. And anyone that does their own private research, it doesn't take long.
Hmm.
And in any crisis, go and look at the country and see if it's signed up to, say, the Paris Agreement. Because the Paris Agreement on the climate chains, I call it climate chains, is on board with it. They're working with the Club of Rome. If you're signed on to the Paris Agreement, you're working with the Club of Rome.
Hmm.
That's for sure. Not saying Trump isn't working with the Club of Rome, but yeah. So who else is he saying? There's another guy here, just privately I'll talk about it. There's another guy here you can look up, and he's saying that the members include Al Gore, Maurice
Hmm.
Strong. We know Maurice Strong was involved.
Oh
He
yeah.
was a big orator on this big plan of uh, you know, uh, population control, really. They're quite open with it, a lot of these guys, when you look at it. They quite
Hmm.
openly say, we want, to less people on the planet. Dalai Lama is a member.
Yeah. Yep.
David Rockefeller. David Rockefeller's a member. So these are not little groups, little wish lists, little rich people. These are movers, shakers of the world. Bankers
Hmm.
even belong to it, right? Bill Clinton and Bill Gates are part of it as well.
I mean,
So
just
it's
all the superpowers. I mean, it just seems like the majority of the superpowers of the world have all become a part of this organization here, uh, and
yep.
all pounding the same drum. I mean, all I don't know. I supposedly they're just. Do you think that they just all truly believe in the science, or do you think that they are all kind of plotting some sort of cynical plan
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
sinister
It
plan?
does. It definitely does seem to be that way. It's like when they talk about socialism or
Hmm.
communism, they know it doesn't work.
Sure.
But they'll say it doesn't work. That's why we don't belong to it.
Hmm.
But we'll give it to you guys because you guys accept it. You guys will want this. They're selling it to us in
Sure.
effect. So that's their business plan. They don't care. It's like, no, that we don't want to even know about it. We know it's a bunch of guff.
Well, and
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
that's a good place to stay right here because these two are actually a lot more related than you would think. So the majority of the public does not understand economics. So they know that they can tempt them and say, "Hey guys, look, here's a whole bunch of free stuff, right? Here's all these great things we're going to do for you through socialism." And the people will say, "Oh, yay, that sounds fantastic." Well, the same is true here. Using climate change. The majority of any population of people are not going to understand science well enough to know if what they're being told is at all true or not. Is the world really going to end? Are we all going to die if we don't accept this plan? The majority of the population is not going to have a clue. So they're just going to believe the, like you said, quote unquote experts that all gather up to this huge club, the Rome, the Club of Rome, and they're the professionals, so we better trust them because if we don't, well, we're all surely going to die.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, another fact of history that seems to be is most people grovel to wealth.
Hmm.
So all these people are very wealthy. So the little peasant in the street without a home, he doesn't grovel to the elite. He's just trying to survive. But the
Yeah.
people in the middle class and the people that are in their slavery system, they do look up to them. It's like, oh wow, this person's an expert, and wow, they're so impressive. I mean, is the middle class going to say, oh, the king has just got no clothes? He's just a dickhead, and we shouldn't even have them. No,
Hmm.
he'll go, oh, that's the king of this or the king of that or the president or the prime minister or whatever. They do it. They're like, and you're like, hang on, are you happy with his policies? Well, yeah, no, but what politician can you be happy with? They'll justify it somehow, and then
Right.
they'll be worshipping him again. So that's part of the problem. These are just people. They have limited capacities. Most of them have major limited tunnel vision with what they do, because their jobs are well paid, their career lifers in their field, and they're well paid. So they're tunnel vision. It's their job, and they're going to
Right.
stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the big trap, is that the money is making these people. And all the scientists, of course, we've heard, they're all on board. A lot of scientists and a lot of people in these institutions here and there come out of it and talk about it and say, hey, no, I left. No, this is a total lie. Again, Tim Ball is one of them. Tim Ball is a genuine defector, you could say.
Yeah.
So in the Club of Rome, the book, and it's free. It's free. If you go online onto Google or whatever, type in the first global revolution, the Club of Rome, and put PDF, and you'll get a free version. And it's all there. It's not edited out. So in the chapter called Vacuum, because they're talking about that with technologies, it can come to a point where when you start to pull the pillars out, there's a vacuum. Everyone was moving forward in momentum, and now all of a sudden things are slowing up. And that's, the economy's slowing. We're going into recession.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a vacuum. So they're in this book, they talk about real detailed stuff about what they're going to do. So here's an example. They say people and nations are beginning to agree to take, and this is back in, 1960s, 67, wasn't it? This is back then. People and nations are beginning to agree to take the next steps together. However, in brackets, they are carefully avoiding to agree on why they are agreeing. So, this is double think and double speak.
Yeah.
This is what they do. It's all double think and double speak. And that could be of another topic. Are these people insane, or is this scientifically worded? Then they publish the book for the public to read. Right.
There's a quote. Go ahead. I'm going to find a quote, because there's a part in this agenda. I'll just summarize it so I don't have to go look for it. To give you an idea of where this is at, they propose that this is such a pressing issue that if something cannot be necessarily proven entirely scientifically, that should not be used as an excuse for them to even slow down the agenda. Because this is such a pressing issue, that it must move forward regardless of if science is on its side or not. And that's written into let's see, it was one of the reports they wrote. I can't remember which one. It wasn't the first global revolution. It might have been limits to growth, but that was part of it. I mean, and that just gives you an idea that this isn't necessarily backed up by science, and that's written right into their own report, saying even if science doesn't back this up, we need to continue to push this forward. It's just too pressing not to. It's fear porn. That's all this is. It's fear porn.
Yep, and we'll go into some of their quotes as well, so people get exactly what they're saying. Sure. And let's not forget that the data that they're getting openly, they tell us this, and they're doing this, probably knowingly, is they're getting data about this so-called catastrophe through computer models. So who built the computer? These top guys build computers and have computer empires. So they build the computer, data in, data out. Oh, we got what we wanted. So it's not even on science, it's on their computer models. So that's a whole thing in itself,
And look at this guy. I've got this quote, this quotes here that I pulled up. This was back in 1970, the one I sent you, Paul Ehrlich. Ehrlich, is that how you pronounce it?
That's it. Yeah, Paul Ehrlich.
Yeah, so this was back in 1970. He said that, let's see, where's it at? 65 million Americans would die of starvation between 1980 and 89, and that by 1999 the U.S. population would decline by $22.6 million. Back in the 70s, he had said that if we didn't make dramatic changes within 10 years, we'd all be dead.
Yep. And then Yep, and then they gave everyone a whole bunch of movies, and they're still doing it today. They're probably amping up the ante with doomsday scenario movies on environmental issues. There's so many
Mm-hmm.
movies out there, you take your pick. But it started with movies like Soylent Green,
Mm-hmm.
and in Soylent Green it says the year is 2023. And power is scarce, and water is scarce, and people have to end up eating people. And there we have an article from Europe of an expert saying, "Oh, cannibalism to save the planet." It's the new buzzword now as well. So everything in Soylent Green pretty much is a model on what they want to do, right down to the idea of the again Huxley's Brave New World, which we'll get into at the end. Huxley's Brave New World of women being no longer marryable. They will be everybody's property. And so even in Soylent Green, the women were the furniture. They were ordered around by the hierarchy of males. So people would think, how the hell could they get there in the far future, another 40 years? How would they get there in the future when it's all about women's rights? Well, because they create the crisis and bring in the shit later. So you could be on top one day, and you're on top so they can knock you off your stool the next day through techniques, of propaganda, and then now the woman's back even worse position. So this is how they do it. You think you're winning and you're not, and they're setting you up for a fall. So anyway, yeah. So there's a whole lot of other little quotes here. So they're saying they are reaching a consensus by practical procedures rather than by formal voting of government representatives. Right? This is in the chapter The Vacuum in the book of the First Global Revolution by the Club of Rome, right? So they're reaching a consensus by practical procedures. See, technique and environmental changes like new corporations popping up, old ones falling, economically falling, and new ones coming up. This is what they mean, practical procedures. So you no longer can buy plastic bags now. Not saying that this is good or bad, but just saying this is how they change. You go through your life and all these changes keep happening. Well, when something goes, it's for a reason. And then they'll put something else in the environment, and then you'll adapt. So the global government period, even beyond Club of Rome, works on what they call, like Machiavelli called, political realism. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just legalese, it's action. It's taking action. It's even to the point of getting people to burn down food supplies,
Mm-hmm.
poison food supplies. And we're seeing this. New Zealand had a strawberry scare. I think Australia did too, where somebody, I mean, the average person won't do this, we know that. These are agents that come in. It's happened for years and years. And they put needles in the strawberries, whole bunches of strawberries. So they go, oh, we've got to throw out all the strawberries. Oh, now everyone can't have strawberries. And it also gets you psychologically too.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
hits you. So this is how they do it. They're very practical in how they attempt to get this agenda into play. People need to know that. They got big power. They'll be working with the military and the police all the way down, and the police forces don't know. You go and talk to a police chief and say, "Do you know about the Club of Rome?" He
Yeah. They
won't
don't
know.
have a clue. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's following orders, and he'll go, "Oh, well, I don't know what happened there," or "We got a mission there, or we got a mission there." Yeah, so it's very important to know that. Many international functions, especially those requiring the most foresight and operational flexibility. This is like the good and for our purposes encouraging news. The good and for purposes of encouraging news. So the outcome. Many international functions, especially those requiring the most foresight and operational flexibility, can be carried out through non-governmental arrangements. See, so that's going along with what I just said. It's not the voting is, like I said, if you think about it this way, change my mind is that you voting is getting the pulse of the public. They go, oh, he's voting for this guy's policies. Oh,
Sure.
now we know what the public's thinking. And they're
So,
giving you all sides. They're giving you left, right, and green and black and all kinds of colors now, so they can gauge what the people are thinking in their different sectors.
And I think they're also just evaluating how good of a job they are doing. I mean, even in Edward Bernays' book Propaganda, he shifts your mind a little bit and sort of tells you that they're not necessarily concerned about what the people's ideas anymore. They're no longer representing the people's thoughts, because the people's thoughts are constructed and formulated and designed by the government through the media platform. So
Through
the government feeds their brains and molds their minds, and so really the temperature that they're taking is just seeing how good of a job they are doing it through their propaganda.
Exactly, yeah. So, and if people, some of you guys haven't heard of this before, but if you think about these concepts and look into things that constitute this, you'll find this is how it works, and you'll find that this is why people even trying to get organized. So, like um, the yellow vest thing in Europe, that's pretty organized, and is that grassroots, and even if it was, don't you think they've already prepared for that? Don't you think they've already
Sure.
sussed that? Because a lot of the books on that about postmodernism, they do talk, and the Club of Rome and all that. They got more than just this book. They talk about that they have to plan for the riots. Like they said from 2010 onwards, and they're right on the money. 2010, you're going to get global protests all around the world, and we are. I mean, look at it. You've just about every country is on its edge, everywhere. So yeah, what else is it saying here? So in many fields, governments have come to realize that the effective deployment of their most cherished right, their sovereignty, requires that it be pooled with the sovereignty of other nations. See, so that's where you're getting all this thing called globalism. The
Mm-hmm.
word globalism fits into this whole concept that Club of Rome's talking about, where you no longer have borders. This is why Trump putting up his border wall. That's a no. The media's, hey, what the hell? He's a bad man and all that, because he's going against this global unification. Because that's all it is. It's unification. Legally, um, quid pro quo. I see a lot of say freedom guys would say, yeah, let's get no borders, because then I'm a world citizen, I'm free. But they're doing that as a quid pro quo. They're saying, look, guys, you can have no borders, yay, but we're going to track you more. Oh.
Yeah.
So there's never everything they give us is a mousetrap. They call them mousetraps. I'll build a better mousetrap. So you come along and get the cheese, and you're caught in it.
Well,
Yeah.
now this Club of Rome and some of the research that I saw, and perhaps this was just, I don't know if this is true or not. You can tell me maybe, but I had saw in some reports that people claimed that they had drawn up a map and split the globe into 12 what they called kingdoms. So their ultimate plan was to split it into 12 kingdoms. Does that have any credibility? Have you read anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, that could be one stage of it, but the ultimate stage, that who was it? I think it was Darwin. Darwin wrote a book called "The Next Million Years." Now, again, this
Oh,
is how they think. Yeah, the next
yeah.
million years, and he talked about. I'm pretty sure it was that book. He talks about a three-state world, to start with, before the global government of no states at all, is to be three trading blocks, and we're already starting to see them build them with the
Yep.
European Union going into Africa, and then
Hmm.
you've got the communist movement from Russia into China, etc. And then so you're going to have a trading block there, and that's going to come down through China into Australia and New Zealand. So you've got the Pacific Union, and then you're meant to have a Union of the Americas. So that was their goal: three trading blocks of the world. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. So what this is from the Club of Rome. This is a big quote here. This is at the end of the chapter, the vacuum, right? And they're sort of talking about the paragraph before it says, uh, in the present situation, in the present situation in the world, the lack of identification of the people with the process of decision making, right? The lack of identification of the people with the process of decision making is expressed in the form of difference, skepticism, and outright rejection of governments and political parties. See, so in other words, they're already telling you this is going to happen. We're not happy with this system. Yeah, because they're making it so.
Mm-hmm.
So you can hate the government. This is how smart they are. So rejection of governments and political parties, which are seen as having little control over the problems of our times. Oh, we just can't figure it out. Hey, oh, oops, a dam broke. Like they let it happen type thing.
Yep.
Oh, we just can't handle it. Oh, it's not working. We need a new system. This is what they're trying to do. These attitudes are clear. Oh,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yep, I'll just get through this thing.
Yeah, my bad.
So, so these attitudes are clearly indicated by decreasing rate of participation in elections, and they even say that, or don't vote. See, they're even planning for this. The attitudes are clearly indicated by a decreasing rate in participation in elections. It's not working. Now, this is the big paragraph. It's not long, but this is the big one. Underneath it, it says, the common enemy of humanity. This is doublespeak. The common enemy of humanity is man. Right? The enemy of humanity is man.
And it says our own enemy.
Yeah. And then he's saying, in searching for a common enemy against whom we can unite. In searching for a common enemy. Where is one? I don't know. Fuck, the Cold War's over. Right. Searching for a common enemy against who we can unite. I mean, why do they even want to unite us? We came up with the idea. Mm-hmm. This is how bad this is. We came up with the idea that pollution, that's an idea. Mm-hmm. The threat of global warming, well, we know that's an idea. Water shortages, it doesn't matter if you're living in the Amazon jungle, you're going to have water shortages. Famine, right? We already see that happening. How much are you paying for a block of cheese now? Or meat even, right? Mm-hmm. And the like. So water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. It would fit the bill. What bill? Their $1 billion bill. Their billions and billions that the World Bank's going to be extracting from all the countries. In their totality, in their totality and their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat, which must be confronted by everyone together. But in designating these dangers as the enemy, we fall into the trap which we have already warned readers about, namely mistaking symptoms for causes. See what they've done there?
Now, as a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, this is right out of the first global revolution, correct?
Yeah, this is in the chapter, the vacuum of the,
right.
Yeah. So this is, anyone can get it. It's free. You can look at it and pass it to everyone that doesn't know what's going on.
That's what I wanted to remind everybody is that this is not out of some crazy conspiracy book where somebody came up with this stuff. It may sound absolutely bizarre, but this is their words. This is what they said. You can just go download the book for free. Go Google it, download it for free.
Yep. So I'll just finish the paragraph. So we fall into the trap which we have already warned readers about, namely mistaking symptoms for causes. So you need to think about that one. All these dangers are caused by human. This is the whole fucking thing of what their means to an end is. All these dangers are caused by human intervention in natural processes. Now, we've had discussions and Socratic discussions on this, and I want the audience to think about this. Are humans natural? If you look up this topic in Google, like human nature or are humans natural, it'll imply that you are not natural. It'll imply that the world outside yourself is natural and you are not natural. That's what they're saying. Now, doesn't that contradict the theory of evolution? Of course it does. See, this is a totally different way of thinking they're bringing in and pushing on the children, which we'll show you later. There's a whole bunch of articles, if you haven't noticed. So all the dangers are caused by human intervention in natural processes, and it's only through changed attitudes, see? Attitudes of man, like propaganda on your brain, and behavior. Remember the behaviorists? Right? They'll ring a bell, Pavlovian training, that they can overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself. Right, so that's behind it. This is the people behind all of this rubbish that doesn't make sense because it isn't real.
Hmm.
These are the people that are doing it.
They came
These
up
are
with
the
the
people.
idea.
Yeah, and it's all in their book, pretty much. It's all in there. You'll get a good gauge of it. It's a good starting point, and it's free. So,
It's actually you don't even have to Google it. It is now uploading to the live stream text, so you can just click on the PDF and download it. It'll be right there.
yep.
And
Um,
like we talked about before we were coming on, uh, as they're looking for something to unite behind, I want to remind you guys of Cliff reminded me of who said it, Reagan, when he came forward and said, essentially, wouldn't it be great to have some, like an alien invasion where it would unite the entire world? Well, this is their alien invasion. That they've decided that this is going to be what they use. I mean, ultimately, it's it's powerful because it puts in the fear that people need to unite, to say, wait a minute, I mean, because humanity can unite behind the cause of, well, all of humanity is going to die if we don't do something about this, because that's what they're telling us here.
yep, absolutely. Here's another quote from the book, another quote from Club of Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Democracy is not a panacea. Democracy is not a panacea. It's not. It can't cure all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, no shit, it can't. See, they're
Right.
they're so they're so perfectionist. These psychopaths, these control freaks, in their
Mm-hmm.
control freak fashion, are perfectionists. They're totally idealists. They're unrealistic as well in their expectations because they don't live like you. They
Mm-hmm.
don't. They don't even mix with people, the average people. So democracy is not a panacea. It cannot organize everything, and it is unaware of its own limits. It's unaware of its own limits. So, like, it's some kind of living thing. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when the Royal Institute of International Affairs says Russia thinks this about the US and India wasn't happy. It's like, come on. What does it talk now? A corporate fiction can talk?
Yeah.
Um, these facts must
Sure.
be these facts must be faced squarely, sacrilegious though it may sound. Sacrilegious though it may sound, these facts must be faced squarely. See, the whole thing was just a load of rubbish, what they said then. Democracy, which is communism too, by the way, democracy is pretty much the same thing. It's heading into dictatorship. All democracies, as Plato said, end in anarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Democracy is no longer well suited for the tasks ahead, right? That's this Club of Rome again. The complexity and the technical nature of many of today's problems do not always allow elected representatives to make competent decisions at the right time. Yeah. So that's them telling you how it is, guys. It's not a conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is a conspiracy, and it is technically the open conspiracy. There's a book out there called The Open Conspiracy, by the way.
Well, and the thing about this is, no, this isn't a conspiracy anymore. I mean, these are not conspiracy theories. Even I don't think that it's even going to be perceived as conspiracy theories because this is now out in the open. This is very public and open debate now. This is not. This is no longer a group of people going, look what they're trying to do. We have a large portion of the population that is literally advocating for these exact things because they do believe that climate change is going to be the end of humanity. You can get in any of the public forums and have these debates. It's not as if people don't believe that there's these group of people anymore that are trying to do these things. They both believe that they are and agree that they should. So that's
Yep.
that's how far this has come along here.
Yep. So, if you don't mind, we'll quickly move on to the
Yep.
website. So, if people again think, oh, it's just a book, and it's just a small group of people, we'll go on to their website. It's up and running, it's not hidden, it's just their website, they don't mind. And it's called the Club of Rome website. And so, if you go in there, you'll actually see them say a lot of the stuff in the open, and you'll
Look at
see them
this.
actually say, you'll see them say that we openly support the climate protests, the little
Student climate
children.
protest. Yep.
Yeah, the little children, because over in New Zealand, in case people didn't know, and I'm not kidding, you can look it up, they had like 5-year-old children doing protests. And one of the national governments, which was the right side, the leftists are in rule, at the moment. That's why these things are happening. A right candidate of the National Party said, this isn't right. 4-year-olds and 5-year-old children in the street protesting is not right.
No.
Yeah. So that's how far they're prepared to go with it. And
But
then also, if nobody intervenes, those children start to believe it when they grow up.
well, see, and there's nothing wrong with teaching your children to be conscious of the environment and I mean, we want our children to be conscious of the environment. We don't want people just running around littering, throwing trash everywhere, and just completely carelessly letting all sort of gases and fumes into the atmosphere. I mean, we have to be somewhat conscious of these things. But when you're protesting, this is taking it to another level. They are literally indoctrinating these children to not just be conscious of the environment, but to really worship it as a religion. I mean, it's going to that point to where, the environment is becoming a god, something to be worshipped, something that we must again humble ourselves to. Like I said when we opened up, I see it getting to that point.
Yeah, I mean, but the slogans that are quoted don't make sense, and there's no evidence to a lot of the quotes that are being said.
Mm-hmm.
So they're protesting what? What are they protesting? They're saying we don't have a future. That's their foundation. We don't have a future. So, well, really? Is that true? I mean, we just found from the people that are organizing this whole event globally are saying, well, it's just an idea. And if you keep looking at the people quoting, and just go and look for them, you can look up who's a member and who's not a member. You'll see they have an fellowship too. They have because they're Freemasonry. They're a Freemason organization. They have a fellowship. And so you'll find that they openly, there's so many quotes out there from people about this. They say they're openly, they're openly saying things like, it is a load of rubbish, basically. And we are doing it for redistribution of wealth, for globalism.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're getting, it's mass redistribution of wealth from the West to the third world countries to standardize their primitive systems into the very latest setups, like in China, the very latest technocracies in China. And then, of course, a lot of these organizations, including the Club of Rome, acknowledge that China is to be the model state for the world in this new technocracy under
Sure.
environmentalism. So, but hang on, China's burning tons of fossil fuels. Well, that's just for now. They've got that's the other contradiction that people are picking up on. It's China's polluting everything. Well, yeah, exactly. They're not there. They can do what they want. They don't. Their terms and conditions of the Paris Agreement is that they don't have to get involved with the carbon taxes like the West had to. They're a little bit starting in now, but nothing like the West. The West is being totally raped into destruction to bring in this new technological control system, based on this idea. So it's it's a deep rabbit hole in itself when you get into it.
Hey, on our YouTube, Zach, what did you say that allowed your YouTube message to be deleted?
Oh, no.
Well, I don't know what he said, but it got deleted. Let me read this quote to you. This is fascinating, Cliff. This is about the Club of Rome supports global student climate protest. It says, people always tell me that they are so hopeful that young people are going to save the world, but they are not. There is simply not enough time to wait for us to grow up and become the ones in charge. Quote from Greta Thunberg. So that gives you an idea of this sense of urgency that they think that they need to have, that we can't wait for our children we can't even wait for our children to be the ones to do this, because by then it'll be too late. Destruction will have set in and we will all perish.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, there's been, since about the 60s, there's been a lot of debunking and fear mongering, both sides, going on in the media for ages. I mean, the actual global warming thing went to global cooling, right? And then now it's just called climate change because, the climate's changing. It's easier to prove that. But there's a deeper thing as well that we could get into at some stage, which a lot of people don't believe, but we can show the facts on it. It's all out there. And that is that there's actually weather modification going on. And you'll find out that the mainstream media is actually coming out now telling you that they're doing it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like 10, 15 years ago, they're saying, what a load of rubbish. We're not doing geoengineering. That's what they call it, geoengineering. And now they're telling you that they're doing it. So because of the modern techniques of propaganda, behaviorism, and wordplay and doublethink and doublespeak and all the different ways they nudge us in our minds, they can accelerate the changes much quicker than they used to without war. Usually they use war to change the culture quickly. Your mass production of weapons and technology permeates down through society later. But
Sure.
if you're at peace, you can't have radical change. So this is another reason why they're doing this and hyping it up, is they need to create a war-type scenario globally with emergency to create new technologies. See? And that's what they're doing. So we're in technically a wartime scenario. Yeah. Here's an article here. Heard on campus, Club of Rome co-president on achieving climate drawdown. And she's holding up a book called The Club of Rome Climate Emergency. Now, they're pushing that out here in NZ Inc. Through all the councils, or there'll be counties in America, but they're councils, which are local governing bodies of towns and cities. So they started with, and this is weird because there's no people in the country towns, or way less people than the big cities. Yet the councils declared climate emergencies in the tiny little towns first, before they even did the big cities. And then they're sort of doing it here. And then what they're waiting on now in their parliament is to do one big foul hit of the hammer in Parliament to declare a climate emergency. And they haven't done it yet because the right wing, the National Party, is saying, no, we're not going to. But they're not telling us. They're not coming out and telling us in the media what's going on there. So people should be aware of that, that it'll be happening to you if it hasn't already. And they're giving you little tidbits of fear, but they won't tell you any detail. That's another thing that should be noticed. They're not telling us anything.
Look at this quote. We have a 10-year window, as we've been saying at the Club of Rome. If we do not actually meet a great deal of our targets already in the next 10 years, we will be committing collective suicide, Dixon DeClave said at Research to Action, the Science of Drawdown, but encouraged the gathered crowd of climate researchers that this goal was indeed feasible and achievable.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yep. They do at any cost. They're going to do this. Here's another low blow. This is how they're low blow players with their propaganda. This is in Melbourne, I think it was, Australia. And their government there is national and semi-anti leftist policies. But again, the media is hush-hush on what's going on there. So in the meantime, at the council level and at the university level, all these things are slightly independent in some ways from these policies. Mm-hmm. So RMIT is some kind of university in Melbourne. Lecturer offered... All right, one of their lecturers offered students full marks for attending climate strike. This is just the other day. So what the hell's with that? Is that truth? Is that honesty? Is that bribery? You're damn right it is. So what the hell's going on here? Why aren't the parents ripping their children out of there, going down there and saying, what the hell are you doing? It's got nothing to do with education.
Right. Well, in this particular case... This is the problem. I'm trying to find it. It was, hold on, the conversation. When I read through this article, it was supposed to have something to do that was related to, a project that they had. However, it did not, it wasn't, it still wasn't right for them to, any school to say that you must, you don't have to, but to get credit for this, you have to go and take part in this protest. I mean, that's obviously wrong on many levels, but it's also, of course, indoctrination in the sense that through your educational system, when you're a child, you're looking up to this teacher to set the example. And so when they are campaigning behind this, and if they are, showing you and molding for you what you're supposed to be, right? Saying, well, this is what's good, this is what's bad. We see that that's really the way, because your entire educational system is just that. So when you're a young child, you start out in elementary school and so forth. The teachers not only tell you the information that you're supposed to learn, but they also teach you how to act. They teach you manners. They teach you a lot of these things that, just sort of sculpt who you become. So once you get to college, for a lot of these kids, they've never gotten out of that mindset. Maybe if you went in as a grown adult, you would be able to think about these things, consciously enough, but not for them.
Sure. And legally, the issue that is being done there for parents, if they want to get some traction, the whole concept of what's going on in that scenario is called undue influence. Undue influence is a legal term that gives right to a legal claim against whoever's using undue influence if they don't cease to do it.
Yeah.
And so it's in other words, undue influence is you're meant to have the confidence in the person so as not to go without the boundaries of what their mandate is. And this is beyond a mandate. It's not education. So it's undue influence. Yeah.
Let me give you a story. So I taught heat and air conditioning at Virginia College here for a few semesters a couple years ago. Maybe it was a few years ago. My supervisor sent me a article. This was back when Obama was still in office. And Obama was working with the United Nations and was proposing a plan that would actually remove all refrigerants from existence globally, not just the United States, but globally. So in other words, there was going to be a global push to ban all refrigerants. So your air conditioning units at home would no longer work. Your trucks that carry around your food and keep it cool so that it does not spoil, those would no longer work. Your air conditioning units in your car would no longer work, along with, an array of other things. Your refrigerators would no longer work. Your freezers would no longer work. Refrigerants are used for so many things. Now, there are alternatives for these things, geothermal cooling, stuff like, there's a lot of different alternatives, but that does not, I don't know of any alternatives that would work for, food transportation or really low temp stuff. I don't know of any. Geothermal would not work for really low temp, freezers and etc. So I never heard anything else from it. So I assume that everyone probably said, yeah, Mr. Obama, that's not going to happen. But that's the push that they're making now. Just imagine how catastrophic that would have been had everyone just said, yeah, sure, we'll subscribe to that. And then within a couple years, they had banned all refrigerants. Now, they've already banned, of course, a lot of refrigerants. The old R22 was banned, and so everyone had to go to this new R410A refrigerant because of the hydrochlorofluorocarbons that were being released. And, so we went from R12 to 134A, etc. So the EPA in the United States anyways has, done a lot to try to make things difficult, especially for the heat and air industry. And just from a heat and air guy's perspective, I will tell you this, it has already ran up your cost on your equipment, and it has reduced your life expectancy of all of it because the pressures run so high, your equipment's going to fail pretty quickly. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that of course, the obvious thing to say is, hey, Mr. Obama, if you're so worried about refrigerant, by all means, be the first one to just get rid of air conditioning units in your own personal home. If it's really that big of an issue for you, by all means, but you lead the way here, sir. You are the leader of the free world. But
Sure. I'm glad you brought that up because there's a couple of things I'd like to put in there.
Yep.
See, in New Zealand, and I'm sure in most of the other colonies, subversively, in other words, it just happens. You don't vote for it, and it just appears in the marketplace. If you buy a car or something and it's got an air conditioner, you look at the bill of the costs of certain checks, because I bought a van that was imported. I'm the first owner, and it's got air conditioning. Well, it actually subcategorizes all the checks they do on an import, and the retailer or wholesaler, well, sometimes they're a bit of both, passes the charges on to the consumer, me. And so I had to pay an extra $225 for air conditioning. So you have to pay extra. You never used to do that. And it's under climate bill, blah, 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 blah. So
So
you a
that's
lot
an
of
excise tax now. Then is what you're saying.
so a lot of people don't even know they're paying it, but you're already paying it, so they'll get in that way. But how's this for how sneaky they are? Even about 15 years ago, here in New Zealand, and probably the rest of the world have noticed it, maybe, we used to have butter conditioners in fridges. We used to have a butter conditioner because New Zealand used to be tons of cows and nice milk, good supply, good meat, nice butter. We have a New Zealand made butter that's beautiful. We pride ourselves on these things.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, all the fridges that you buy have no butter conditioners. I'm not kidding. You even buy a 2-door big luxury fridge, it doesn't have a butter conditioner, which is basically just a little tiny heater that turns on and is compartmentalized from the rest of the fridge, and you put your butter in, it keeps it nice and soft.
Mm-hmm.
So they're no longer in the fridges. So you'd say, well, what the hell's that got to do with carbon? Well, it doesn't. It's got nothing to do with carbon. Well, why did they do it? Because now it's more uncomfortable for you to even buy butter, which they've jacked the price up here too. That's tripled. I'm not kidding you. And this will happen everywhere if it hasn't already. It's tripled in price. Why? Because it's dairy. Well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, you're encouraging cow farts. Back to that again. Well, why the cow farts? Because they want you off protein. Well, what do they want me to use instead of butter? They want you to go and get the fake shit, which is cheap.
Sure.
You go and buy the margarine. Now go and look up margarine and see how it works on the digestive system. You'll see it doesn't work too well. See, so I still eat butter. But I have to go back to, I use an old-fashioned way now. There's a little French cup thing you can buy that's really cool, keeps it soft. But that's the sort of thing they do.
I do miss the I believe it. I believe it's. I can't believe it's not butter guy though. He. You remember that guy? Do you remember him? Fabio. Wasn't it Fabio? Maybe you didn't have that there. Maybe it's just been a United States thing. He was always in all the advertisements for it. But likely. The likeliness of more than likely what happened there is that they, whatever environmental protection agency you have there has probably raised the efficiency standards so high that they have to do whatever they can in order to, raise the efficiency while keeping the costs down on the equipment for the consumers. In the heat and air conditioning industry, I'll give you another example here. If you have a heat pump, which I don't know if you guys have those there or not, but here in the United States, if you live in the South, you probably have a heat pump, which is, just an all-electric system, and essentially your refrigeration cycle is just reversed, so you're heating the inside. But however, it has to go into defrost, and the way that works is if you're pumping refrigerant one way, it goes one way and then back another way. When it would go into defrost cycle, it reverses that process so that it heats those outdoor coals up. It used to have what was called a soft shift cycle, which means that the unit would shut down for a moment and then kick back on, and that would make it so that it wasn't just violently shifting from one, everything's going one direction and then violently shifting and just going to the other direction, making a lot of racket and doing a lot of damage to your equipment. Well, the EPA has consistently kept raising this, the efficiency standards, and all the manufacturers, in order to keep the cost down, they found that they had to get rid of that soft shift portion of their equipment so that they could maintain that efficiency, because the time that it takes for it to shut down and start back up, it just costs too much energy running the indoor heat strip, so they had to get rid of it. Now what happens is every winter I get a ton of calls for people that just got this new equipment because their old heat pump didn't do this and now their new one does. It just slams over. There's a reversing valve inside the equipment that shifts the direction of that refrigerant flow, and when it does, that compressor just makes this god-awful growling noise. It sounds like it's about to explode, because it is. I mean, it's, you've got 400 psi on one side, and then, maybe probably 200 or so on the other end, maybe 250, and it just drops like that, and it immediately shifts over. So all this excessive damage on the equipment. Now, I have to ask the question here, Cliff. I'm wondering if they've ever done any studies on this, because I've pondered on this. I think, well, how much energy does it take to create this equipment? And if we are dramatically reducing the lifespan of this equipment by half, right? Is it really any better for the environment to do this? If people are having to buy heat and air equipment twice as often, I mean,
Yeah,
if you
well, I
can,
mean, yeah, I get what you're saying. Well, I mean, the what they call it in the terms of the greenery, the green religion, we'll call it, through the Club of Rome, is renewable, recyclable. So
mm-hmm.
instead of like here, they've banned plastic straws, but they haven't in some. Like you go to Burger King, you still get them in your drink. You go to McDonald's, they're all cardboard straws now. So
Yeah,
that's representative of renewable.
you
So
have cardboard
renewable,
straws.
yeah, yeah, at McDonald's they do, but
Oh
they're
wow,
right on board with the agenda. McDonald's is right on
sure.
board.
All the
Not all,
corporations are, yeah.
yeah. So it's in certain complying businesses, which is the majority. Why? Because they're controlled by the government. I mean, you just think about it. All corporations really are controlled by the government because they run the money, and the money controls all the corporations. So
Mm-hmm.
if they've got a corporation that's outside the jurisdiction of a country, that's totally under their control. Yet in the country, a corporation is controlled by the regulation of the quote unquote government, which is private as well. All right, they got their private side with their international corporations. So they've got it all ways. They control it all ways. And the international jurisdiction for a corporation has more flexibility in the nature that it's built on. Where a corporation that's built in a corporate fiction called a country is now regulated by that corporation. So these legal fictions called countries are just legal entities of incorporation that make it convenient to control the things within the body of a corporation. Legally, on paper, we're talking here. We're not talking reality. We're talking, the flat land, the flat earth, which is legal land on paper.
Sure.
Yeah. So we can see that there's a lot of techniques that are working beyond government. This is what I'm trying to get to here. It's beyond voting. It's beyond politicians. This is just one organization of many that work in these types of ways of what I said before, political realism, which is strategically building the cities, especially because they're all fake. Build the cities with a long-term plan, with a very detailed, interlocking, interrelated environment that one thing knocks to another. Like I said, with the take away the refrigerator heater for the butter, you'll now more likely some people will drop off buying butter. And when you eat the margarine, it'll cause stomach cancer. And now we've got our depopulation agenda going back to Club of Rome. Because remember, this whole thing, if you read the Club of Rome, is all to do with the enemy of man is man. And why the doublethink? Because their whole agenda is merely to thin out the population. That is their goal. So anyone that's on board with this agenda, and most of it, 90% of it, is lies. They'll hype up they do it here all the time. If there's a bit of drizzle, it's a crisis. Or
Right.
something might happen. They always say, oh, might happen, it might happen, it might happen. Well, we don't see any evidence, and you've lied before, so get lost.
Right.
That's that type of
Right.
thing.
You know,
But I'd
and
like to... Oh, okay, Karen. Yep.
I was just going to say real quick and so all these little things that we talk about, right? So I think the ultimate key is to maybe find the mechanisms that they use, because when we talk about the butter or the soft shift cycle on an air conditioning unit, et cetera, of course the Club of Rome and these guys are not independently designing every little thing, right? No, they come up with a broad idea. And they put out some basic instructions on how to make these things happen. And then from there, it branches out. Now, once you get just a level below that, compartmentalization comes into key here. The people that are coming up with these things, they have no idea why they're getting rid of the butter conditioner or the soft shift cycle and air conditioner. They don't know that it's part of some grander scale of things, or they don't know that now buying margarine is actually a part of population control, right? It sounds really bizarre to even say something like that. They have no idea.
Yeah. They have no idea that these things are connected. But because for instance, with the food supply, the big international corporations, as we know, have bought up a lot of farms. So they control a lot of the food supply. Once you control the food supply, you can do all kinds of things with the food. And they've been doing it. So when they talk pharmacological, most people think just don't go and buy a vaccine. No, they're already modifying the food. They want to modify the meat. People go, oh, they want to get rid of meat. Oh, well, so what? Cut down on meat. No, but hang on, they want to bring in fake meat. That's their goal. It's to still get you to eat meat, but a fake meat, or you can eat bugs and rat toast or something. No kidding.
Yeah.
Or humans,
Yeah.
They say eat humans. So let's remember what the book's called, and I'll finish with this quote. The
Okay.
book was called The First Global Revolution, not the second, not the last, but the first global revolution. So what he's implying is there's never been a global revolution on planet Earth. Now we go to Huxley's quote, Aldous Huxley of United Nations UNESCO, back in probably the 50s, probably he said this. And he says there will be, in the next generation or so, which is about 20 years, there will be, in the next generation or so, a pharmacological method. That's going back to what I said. Pharma covers everything you consume. A pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak. Producing the kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by pharmacological methods. And this seems to be the final revolution. See?
And on that note too, Cliff, I want to remind people that a lot of this information comes from like Aldous Huxley and all that. That's also all posted on your channel. There's some great videos on your channel as well that cover some of this material.
Yes, there is a talk by Aldous Huxley on my channel, and it's the one with the little guy with the virtual reality set in black and white. So they're already doing that way back then. And if you go on there, it's got the actual talk with Aldous Huxley telling you about the final revolution. So it's all out there. It's all, it's not hidden.
Yep. So, on that final note, maybe we should ask the question here. A lot of this is based around climate change. Cliff, do you believe that climate change is real? I mean, just to dive into that, right? We really haven't addressed just that alone. I mean, is climate changing? And if it is it something that we should be concerned about?
Of course it's changing. That would be, by using those words in those ways to anybody, we would all agree the fact is that the climate is changing. It's always changed.
Well, just the terminology. You notice we went from global warming. We went quickly from global warming to climate change.
Yeah. So that is a very vague word, of course, right? So the key there of stepping into their paradigm is they say it's man-made climate change, right? Now, this is where it gets funny, though, because they do legalisms. Remember, they tell you what they're going to do to you. And so the tricky dicky of this is this, that yes, man is changing the climate, right? Man is changing the climate. Some men are flying jet planes spraying chemicals that are messing with the weather. Some men are operating HARP facilities and messing around with the ionosphere with the HARP and all that. Some men are controlling the lasers and all that stuff that works with the HARP technology. So technically, if you call the people that operate the military-industrial complex men, then men are, in fact, changing the climate. But you aren't. So the issue is this, they're blaming you, the peasant. But they do this for everybody. Even income taxes and taxes are meant to be internal in their jurisdiction, in their corporation, right? In their thing. It's all internal. So when the Royal Institute of International Affairs News is talking down to you, think of it as they're talking to themselves. They're talking to themselves. They're not even talking to you, but they hope that you buy into it. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's how crazy it is. Yep. It's, I mean, of course they're trying to talk to you, but I mean, so it's an internal thing, their own codes, their own words, their own methods. look at how the media talks down to you. Look at it; it's
Oh yeah.
everywhere,
Oh yeah.
And yet people don't complain. Start complaining. Don't put up with it. Boycott being put down. We are sovereign beings. We are individually unique people that deserve equal respect. We are equal with popes and queens and kings. We are not subservient, And so these guys with their, and most of you'll find as we go down this track, most of your world is mind control and propaganda. So, there's so much lies. And once you can get rid of and throw it all out, well, you can have a whole clean slate and then start questioning them properly. Because most stuff is lies out there. That's
Right.
slanted. It's slanted. Things like, a car crash did happen. The plane did crash, or maybe it didn't. But, things do happen and then it's slanted.
Sure.
When they do the protests, sometimes they'll film 50 people and say that it was 100,000. The photograph won't film the huge amount of people, or if they film a huge amount of people, it'll be from some other time on some other issue. They'll say it was the people protesting. So it's very devious, the way they're doing this, and most of it is lies. Most of the pollution shit they show you is also lies. It'll be skewed and it'll be extreme, like I've been saying.
Well, right now,
So
if for those of you that are watching on YouTube, while we've been talking, I've pulled up the NASA website, and you look at some of their climate change stuff, and you can see that around the 1900s we started to see a rise, but right around the Industrial Revolution, especially, I mean, we just see it just skyrockets. It just starts to shoot straight up, right around the Industrial Revolution. Dr. Tim Pool, like you said, he goes into great detail about a lot of this stuff, where their studies were, all you have to remember that when they say 97% of scientists agree that climate change is man-made, what you have to remember though is that a lot of the information that they're handed, that they base all of their research on, is handed to them by a very select few amount of people. So if that original information that is given to them is flawed in any way, the rest of their science is flawed as well. And Dr. Tim Pool even goes into great detail. If you'll look up here, they tell you that yes, water vapor accounts for a huge, and here they just say that water vapor accounts towards the greenhouse effect. What they don't tell you is that it's 95% of the greenhouse effect. However, in these studies that they were given and done, when they were given these studies, they were told specifically to only investigate and to only do research on man's effect on the greenhouse effect, and they completely ignore the 95% of the water vapor in a lot of this research that they do to say that it's man-made, right? So there's a lot more to this, so when you hear numbers like, 97% of scientists agree that climate change is man-made, well, there's more to that story. You cannot just take that as surface value. It's flawed, and I would imagine that probably a lot of these scientists do believe that their research is valid.
Sure. Well, their paycheck dictates that they would be best to agree.
Sure.
There's another top scientist that's credible as well, called William Happer. And William Happer is appointed by Trump. I know you go, oh, here we go, but there's some people out there. But he is just a normal guy. In fact, he was going to set up basically a panel he was going to set up, and something went on, and they're not telling us, but he was going to set up a panel that would ask questions to the climate scientists about the opposition to their claims about the climate, because according to William Happer, who is just basically a top physicist scientist,
he just quit.
I wouldn't think he'd quit because he'd be passionate to get the lies out there. But if you go and look at, he goes back to his university and he won't be, he'll probably do the odd talk to students and that, but he'll be heavily governed by the powers that be. If he starts getting up in the face of all these contaminated students, he'll find himself suicided with 2 bullets in the back of the head. So, you know what I mean? So he will be still doing it, but his hands will be tied. This is what I mean. But go and look at William Happer's talks and interviews. He'll tell you what he's found on the climate thing, and that's another one that'll blow you away.
So, yeah, I
That's
just pulled up this article on him actually, and it says when William Happer realized this summer that his plan to question climate science had been shut down by the White House, he knew he'd stick to his promise to serve exactly 1 year in President Donald Trump's administration and then leave. Happer's original idea to review climate research involved a team of scientists who would critique government science reports and play up the areas of uncertainty. It would be centered on attacking the national climate assessment and potentially be used to mount a challenge to the endangerment finding, the scientific underpinning of federal climate policy, according to several associates of Happer. But the big thing there is he realized real quick that the White House would just shut it down.
Yeah, I think that there's powers that be in the White House that control Trump. I think that from looking at the Trump election right through to today, I was hopeful that maybe something would be different, and if it was, he'd get whacked too. But he seems to be in a situation of contracts again, like any head of any country seems to have to face up to the bankers again. And because he's the president of the United States corporation, the president doesn't own the corporation. A president works for the corporation. So ultimately, he has to toe the line.
Right.
So that's just sad, but that seems to be how it is. And so I would assume that the strategy they're doing with Trump is to take the neocon stance. That's how it's forming. And therefore they'll give the Americans a reprieve against open hostility of climate change on your people. Because think of it as a war technique. Climate change propaganda is a war technique, and it's to bring in a totalitarian technological society without tears, like Huxley said. So you don't want that. So I think that Trump is trying to do good as much as he can, but he's also in contracts to do the neocon cleaning up of the Middle East. That's what it seems to be. So, and the elite talked about this. This is important. Their plan is this: to use the United States military, because of its humongous nature and its zest of religious Christianity, etc., like Elul said, to go into the Middle East and totally destroy non-compliance to the new cultural systems that are being set up there. This is what they're doing. And once these wars are over, covert, subvert, and open hostilities, once they're over, now they'll turn back to America, and now you'll get your Paris Agreement and all the rest will come in on you too. And by that stage, the rest of the world is already going to be under it.
Well, so that really actually brings a different perspective too, doesn't it, as far as gaining control over oil? I mean, typically we think that these massive, powers globally are after oil because they just want oil money. But there's sort of a shifting perspective when you think maybe they're actually just trying to shut down the oil.
Fuck yeah. I mean, people have to get over the idea that money is what they're after. They just want power and control. Money is a means to an end.
Money means something to us, but not them. They don't care about the money. It's just a means of control over us, and that's it.
Yeah, think of money as in their system. Forget about the word government; it's just too vague. But their system, their global system that you're born into, and your parents were born into too, and your grandparents, they basically, they set it up in a way where. The whole environment is controlled by money. It's controlled by money. And we are like rats in a maze, and we pull the lever for seed. They train you behaviorally to pull the seed. And the present seed is called money.
Yep.
So we go to work for what? For money. Yep. You go to work for money. Most people do that. So there's your seed. And they'll change that seed soon into something else. And you'll be. So the key there is behaviorism, and that you are being used to build this new world order. We're the little elves that hammer away at the new world order. Yeah.
that being said, I think here pretty soon, I've been thinking about taking a little road trip up to Elberton, Georgia. Go take a look at the Georgia Guidestones up there. I grew up 20 minutes from there, so I've got some friends there I could probably go say hi to and just take a little stroll up there and see the Georgia Guidestones here pretty soon. So we'll probably set up a show for that, some material on that pretty soon, probably go into detail there and see if we can maybe go into some research about who, because I don't know if you guys have ever done any research on that. The people that asked for that to be built, they were very, private about it. They didn't want it they really didn't want it to be known who did it. Now, Elberton, Georgia is a huge granite town. Basically, that is the thriving economy in Elberton, which is a very, very small town in Georgia. It's Elbert County, Elberton, Georgia. You have one little town, one school system, and the entire county. It's very small, and but granite is their thing. So they, of course, built them out of granite. And in that same area, a lot of people locally always said that it was known as the center of the universe. So that was the center of the earth. I'm sorry. These Georgia Guidestones, for whatever reason, locally, were always known to everyone local that people said it was the center of the earth. It's very interesting. That's just coming from someone that grew up locally there. That was always the local rumors that went around. But even then, when I was younger, I went and looked at them, but I never read what was on them. I never, really took the time. I just wasn't into it at that time. I was more interested in skateboarding or playing guitar or something. So, but
Sure.
Maybe I'll take a trip up there, because that of course the Georgia Guidestones, it talks about all this too, and you have to go, what in the hell? Why was this put here, and why was it put there? Why was it put in Elberton, Georgia? I mean, this little small place out there. So weird, so odd.
Yep. There's a small book that used to be out on the net on that Georgia Guidestones for free too. Maybe sometime we can do a talk on that, because it is quite a mysterious background to how that came about. The Georgia Guidestones. But yeah, that's the thing. There's so much I hope we've covered enough to basically give an introduction to the Club of Rome. It is, that I think covers a lot of bases of what they're about, and people just need to do their own research. At least the book's out there for free. It obviously leads into a whole lot of areas that we just don't have time to speak about. So this is why we're doing this. There's so much we can talk about that's quite pertinent that people need to know. Yeah.
Yep.
So.
All right. So cool. We'll call that quits, and I hope you guys learned something, about the Club of Rome. Hope this helps you guys. By all means, I was actually really excited to get into research with this last podcast. I talked to Cliff about doing something on the Club of Rome, and since I've been doing research on it, and because I didn't know anything about Club of Rome until then, like I'd imagine probably a lot of you didn't know. And once I got to looking at this, I was really like, wow, how did I not know about this? I mean, especially that, because I've looked so deeply into Agenda 21 and these things, I'm just going, how in the world have I never heard of the Club of Rome? Or I've heard it, but I've heard heard it referenced. I've just never really looked at it. And even for a lot of truthers out there, I'm sure you guys, or many of you have probably never heard of the Club of Rome or have never looked at it. It's quite shocking. I think this group has done a really good job of sort of staying behind the scenes and staying behind the curtain. I just think there's a lot of people that just haven't paid attention to it very much, and it's kind of shocking. It's kind of shocking. So, all right, we'll shut this down. So, guys, if you're on YouTube and this is your first time here, by all means go. Or if you've been here before but you've never come into the Discord server, whatever it may be, if you're still around, I highly encourage all of you guys to join the Discord server. That link to do so is in the description of the video. You can just go in there, click on the link, set up an account if you don't have one. Once you're in, you'll see us all in the voice chat. We're going to be jumping up to the live voice chat, and we're going to be just having a little chat there. So we just carry this conversation over. But in this conversation, everybody and anybody is welcome to come and join the conversation. So by all means, come have a chat. If you believe that we are wrong about something, I highly encourage you to come. I think healthy debate is always good. Someone to put you on your toes a little bit, not just be in an echo chamber. That's always healthy for everybody. So by all means, come on in. Otherwise, thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to hit subscribe and all that kind of stuff. Like the videos. That just helps the channel out in general. Share the videos around. It definitely helps us to get this out to more people. We want to reach an audience. So that's about it, guys. Thanks for being here. We'll see y'all later.
Next